Let's talk about a solution for homelessness. Now, your first reaction to this is going to be, this is cruel. But let me tell you what's cruel. Is when somebody is living in a tent on the sidewalk, having to sleep on a hard sidewalk, cold sidewalk, with no other real options. So what needs to happen is we need to have a temporary housing solution for people who are homeless, and then so that they can have, there's a lot of people who are homeless who are actually just have gotten there because of destitution, not necessarily because of drugs, not necessarily because of some of the typical things that people, the stereotypes that people have on homeless people, which is, that they're drug addicts or they're crazy or they're whatever. There are some of those, but there's a lot of people who are not that way, who just basically became destitute, or a series of different things happened to them and they ended up on the streets. So let's talk about a solution. So the first solution is a temporary housing, and we're going to talk about that in a second. And then get a job, and then there's the other solution is to get into permanent housing, and there's also solutions for that. We're going to talk about those in that order. But first of all, we need to understand the problem. When somebody's on the streets, it's not just because or not just that they're living on the streets. That they have a problem with is security. So when they're on the streets, they get a job, and a lot of them do. They get jobs and they try and work their way out of it, and they actually do get off the streets eventually, some of them. And what they do is, what happens is when they're at work, a lot of times, because they have no place to put their things that is secure, because they have no home, everything gets stolen from them while they're at work, and then they come back to nothing, and it's just a constant cycle of trying to get off of those streets. It's very difficult to do. So what I have is a solution, a temporary solution, and a stair-step way for this to happen, and somebody could use this idea and actually turn it into something if they wanted to. So, what's in the picture? This is actually a shipping container. And I was thinking about putting them in halves, but I think it could go into quarters. So you could have a shipping container is 40 feet long by 8 feet by 8 feet. Okay. And so that gives you a 4-foot section 4 times. And you have, and you could divide it into 4 different pieces. So 4, 8, 12, 16. So one shipping container could be a temporary home for 16 people. Now you might say that is a really small place to live in, and you're not living there. You're just using it to sleep and hold your things. So this is how it would work. You would take a shipping container, cut it into 4 sections, okay, and then divide it by 4 in the middle, so that would give you 4 feet by 4 feet by 4 feet by 4 feet. So you could sit up in a 4-foot section, sit up and maybe even have a solar panels on the roof, and you could have maybe a reading light or something like that, so you could do a few things at home or whatever, and plug in your cell phone, some things like that. They could have batteries in there too. There'd be enough room for that. In 10 feet, because how tall are you to sleep? You could have a little cubby in the end of it, and you could have a 6-foot or 8-foot, 7-foot bed in there, and have 3 feet of storage inside there. So what would happen is, on the doors, you would take each section and close them off. Your door would have an electronic lock that you would get a code for, and you could make a phone call and get the code or whatever, depending on where it's at. I think if a public entity owned them, they could call the public entity and then say, hey, I'm going to stay here. Well, how long are you going to stay? Of course, they have to have a time limit on that, because you're going to have to I think most people wouldn't want to stay in this for very long, but it would be better than staying on the streets, and it would give them some better options as far as securing all your things. So you would have the only code to this, and whoever the supervisor of it would as well. And you could lock all your things in there during the day, so a person could have their cell phone or their laptop or whatever while they're accumulating a few things that they need to work to live on their own, and they could actually commute from here to a job and save money, because this would cost nothing. If if for instance, the options out there right now is basically stay in a tent on the streets. That's one of them. Second option, they stay in a homeless shelter. What happens in homeless shelters? There's a lot of rapes. There's a lot of uh, stealing in those homeless shelters. There's a lot of problems with disease. And basically, a homeless shelter, if you didn't know, is a bed in a big room. And it gives you no security, it gives you no individuality, and it gives you no address. Now these could be put in places like in 10-foot sections. They could be stacked on top of each other. There's a lot of options that you could do with a 10 by 8 building. It was what it would be. And you could take these and stack them on top of each other. You could have a little ladder that goes up to the upper ones. They could you could put a little restroom somewhere, one of those portable restrooms, and the people could take a shower in a communicable area. They have those trailers that have showers, that they have at campsites and stuff like that. They could have those type of things for men and women, and that would give people the chance to be clean and have a place for them to put their things. That's really all this would be. There would be a temporary solution, and it would give them an opportunity to save some money and make a go at housing or getting a room to rent. I think the first step with getting out of homelessness, I think, is getting a room to rent or buying some sort of a camper motorhome or something like that. And this would give them the opportunity to save the money up to do that. So I was thinking maybe put a time limit on it, say 2 or 3 months that they could live in this, and then something like that. I don't know. That could be all worked out. It all could be changed from there. But then it would give them an opportunity to save that money and then get out of homelessness. That's just my idea. Now, the first thing you're going to say, Mike, that's kind of cruel. But if you asked a homeless person, would you rather stay in this or would you rather stay on the street? I guarantee you they would say, I think I would rather stay in a 4 by 10 section of a room that I can lock up rather than be on the street. And most of them would rather have this than be in a homeless shelter. This would be a solution to that as well. So a charity, and the thing that we would need is the government to actually allow this. They could have push bar doors on them so that they were fire safe, so that if you had a fire or something like that, you could just push the door and it would open. You can leave. They could put a small windows in each one so that they have some daylight, and so that you'd have some sense of home to it. You could put small windows in. You wouldn't want a very big window because you'd want to make sure that nobody was able to climb in that window. So keep it down, keep it very simple. They could put in an HVAC system, of course, solar panels on the roof. You could have a battery backup running it. It could be completely mobile. Something like this could be anywhere. And the thing about something like this is like a private entity. So the thing is there's 2 different options. People would say, okay, well, let's get the government to do something about it. Well, first of all, when you give the government the job, you're basically just shucking it off to someone who, basically saying you don't really care about it. When you give it to a private entity, say, because somebody like, if they were able to make these, somebody like the Salvation Army could make them, and they have something already, something not quite like this, but they could have something, like this, if it was available to them, and they could manage it. They could have a job board outside of it. You could have all these different charities that would run these, and it would be a very simple and a very cost-effective solution to getting people off of the streets. So, but what we need from the government is we need them to allow this to be, allowed to be a home, a temporary home. So that's where we would run into the red tape. Now, some people say, well, make the government do it. Okay, this is the problem with the government doing things. All right, first of all, this particular item would have to go to an engineer, okay? And the engineer would have to approve it, and then they have to take it to an architect, and the architect would have to approve it. You're seeing where I'm going with this? The cost would be ridiculous. Then what they would do is they would say, oh, well, all this stuff, and then would go up for bid. Okay, and some contractor would come in, and he would say, "Okay, I'll do this for 10 million," and then he would tell his do so many of them for $10 million or whatever, put them all over the place, and then the person in office would say, "Hey, buddy, I gotta, this it's going for 10 million." He goes, "Well, I can't even build them for that." "That's okay. Just get the bid. Get the bid." So he goes and gets the bid, right? One of the homies of one of uh, the politicians, okay, gets in there, and then what they would do is they would say, "Okay, we'll do this for 9,900,000, whatever." So they get the job, right? And then what they do is they would do something called change orders, and this is what they're famous for, these contractors. And they would just take this job and they would run it up to, instead of being 10 million, it would be about 30 to 50 million. And what I'm trying to say is just corruption gets opened up for something like this when you get government involved. It's better if you use private entities. That's why I support the Republican government, because they are for less government. The Democratic government is famous for doing stuff like this and actually, making it some sort of a pocket profit for them. So anyway, just thought I'd put that in there to inform you why I don't agree with that. And this might be a good solution for a lot of people. I just want to see what your thoughts are. If you're homeless, tell me what your thoughts are. If you're not homeless, tell me what your thoughts are as well. Make a comment down there. And maybe if you have a better idea or see a better thing, put a link in there. That'd be great. Talk to you guys in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe.